And welcome to this webinar today on the Visiting the Doctors. Margaret Murray is my name. I'm the Student and Membership Officer with NALA, and I'm delighted you're able to join us at this webinar. And I'd like to introduce my colleague Helen Ryan from NALA as well. And Helen is the Policy Officer in NALA, but has been working on health literacy for a number of years. And we're delighted to have her share her experience, or I suppose the work we've done on visiting the doctors. And she'll take you through a presentation of about 20 minutes. And there are two ways you can take part in this. Obviously, you're listening there at home or that, but if you do want to ask a question, we would certainly welcome you to do that. And there's two ways to do that. One is where the orange button is the orange that has the arrow in it. If you look down at the bottom of that, there's an option of putting up your hand like this. And if you click on that, then I have a list in front of me of the attendees here, and I will see your hand. It's kind of like putting up your hand, and I'll see the little symbol come up beside your name and be able to invite you to speak then, and you can ask Helen. I can unmute you. The attendees are naturally muted unless you put up your hand, and I'll unmute you during this. The other way of asking a question is you can type it in. So if you go to the orange arrow and you get a number of options, then if you click on the orange arrow, and one of them is questions. And if you scroll down, if you go down to the questions, and on the right hand side of that, there's a box with a little diagonal arrow going through it. Click on the diagonal arrow and it opens up. And from there you can type in a question. But either way of those is fine with us. I'll be looking out. You won't really be distracting Helen. She won't see it. So she'll be presenting. But I can bring her attention to yourself and your question or that, or I can read out the question for you if you've typed one. But just to tell you a little bit about today, this webinar is one of 5 webinars we're having this week for students, and they're replacing, unfortunately we couldn't have the second student day. We did have one NALA student day, which was great. We had 125 students there and we were delighted. And we had workshops at that. So most of the webinars this week were workshops that we had on the student day, and we've just transferred them online in a way. And we're hoping that, you know, people will get a chance to look at this either by being here today or afterwards. We're going to put the webinars on YouTube. So thank you very much for joining us. We're delighted to have you here. And I think I'll hand you over to my colleague Helen now. And just say welcome, and I hope you get something out of the workshop. Thank you.
Great, thanks Margaret. I'm delighted to be here today to talk about the very important topic of visiting the doctors. And I'm going to look at 3 areas. I'm going to look at what is health literacy, so we'll have a little chat about that, and health numeracy. We'll talk about visiting the doctors and what, I suppose leading into that, some tips and strategies for what you can do when you're in, before you go to the doctor and then while you're at the doctor. Okay, so the first thing just to share with people, we've a couple of new documents out at the minute, and this is a visual that we have trying to represent what is literacy, numeracy and digital skills. So even taking the middle bit there, we see that it's many different things, from text obviously and written paper to filling in a form perhaps where you have to go to the doctor's surgery or sign a form perhaps for getting an injection or something like that. Numbers around money, so we're run down to the shop, I need to deal with that comes into it. If I'm in the pharmacy, I want to buy something, or if I'm working out medication, numbers come into that again. And then there's the digital side of everything, because everything is becoming much more digitalized now. So even if anyone has been to the hospital recently, I don't know if you've got a hospital that has a touch screen, you might have had to use that on the way in to find out, to register, and then to find out it prints out something in telehospital, for example, and then you've got to find your way around the hospital to where you need to go for your appointment. So there's an awful lot of literacy, numeracy and digital skills in 4 areas of your life, if you see that there. So in areas of family, on work, on social and community, and what we're talking today really about sort of the health and well-being and visiting the doctors. And then the broader part of the circle there, again, all of those skills that we are using all the time, listening and speaking included in on that. It's in all these parts of our life with employers and work and dealing with trade unions if we're in a union, and then we've got farming and agriculture and all the things we do there. Community groups, we're all part of the community and we might be involved in certain things or go to the library. The environment, huge issues, and climate at the minute. Dealing with public services, which I'm sure most of us are, one week or another, there's some reason that we're using certain services. And then finally, democracy and politics is very important, using our vote, understanding that. So hopefully it's a nice visual, it's less wordy, and just wanted to share that with people today, that sort of explaining that literacy is in every part of our life and we're using it every single day.
Thanks, Helen. I just want to see if, I think Chris might have a question, so I'm just going to see there. Chris, you're unmuted now.
Me?
Yeah, did you want to ask a question or?
No.
No. No problem, no problem, no bother. I'll put you on mute again.
No worries at all. And if there's anything we can have a look. Great.
Thanks.
So then, sort of, what is health literacy and numeracy? So the two of them are in there, and really we look at health literacy and numeracy as two sides of one coin. So part of it is about the most important bit really is about, first of all, what are the health services delivering to me? So when I arrive in my doctor's surgery, is it really well signposted that I would make my way to find it if it's in a building, for example? In a lot of the primary care centres now, when you walk in, there's a reception. And is it easy to find my doctor? Are they considering that if I do struggle with reading signage, that there's a nice person at the desk saying, good morning, how are you? Can I show you where to go today? So very much that the health services would be delivering a sort of a literacy friendly service, and just being very conscious that there may be people who are coming in who might struggle with some of the signage or filling in forms. So that's half of the issue. And the second piece then is, what skills do I have then when I'm arriving into that service? So how am I able to understand it? Is my, you know, I'm not too fluent with writing and I don't want them to ask me to fill in a form today. So what supports are needed then if I'm struggling with that? So can I understand and can I do the things that I might have to do at my health appointment? And it is about this sort of, we call it a mutual understanding. So sometimes, again, when we deal with health services, one of the big issues that happens for us is emotion. So we're not, always, even something, and I don't mean to trivialize breaking your arm, but it's a good example. So if your arm is really sore, you're whatever, the doctor says to you, you broke your arm. First thing in my mind is, how silly was I? I can't believe I tripped. Oh, God, broke my arm. I wonder, am I going to be able to drive now? Oh, maybe not. God, how am I going to do the shopping? Geez, I won't be able to pick the kids up from, you know, lift them up. Oh, am I going to be able to type? Well, so your brain goes into this automatic sort of answering all these questions, blurry, oh my God. In the meantime, the doctor has probably explained that to me. He's probably said, Helen, your arm is broken. You need to go into a cast now for a number of weeks. You can't drive, you can't lift things. And I've heard none of that, because my brain has moved. Once I heard what the problem was, my brain went off in Hido. So, and I'm using the arm as a sort of, as I say, I don't mean to trivialize it, and a broken arm is painful, but you can imagine if you got a more serious diagnosis, at least an arm can be fixed, and you get that, and all of a sudden then your brain really becomes mush. And this is where a lot of good health literacy practice is, that if the GP or if you're in meeting a consultant is giving you news, that the news is allowed to sit with you, and that not a lot of information is thrown at you. So that would be a case of where that would be good health literacy practice, where the consultant or the doctor would give you that space and time to consider what he's just told you. And then on your side, then hopefully if they're handing you things like leaflets or things to fill in, that there will be supports there and mechanisms there to help you with that. So we all need to be on the same page. And often with health services, and they're busy and there's a time, I've talked to a lot of people when I go around and do workshops around the country, talk to a lot of customers or patients in the health service, and people feel that they don't want to take up too much time and they don't like to ask too many questions. And that's a worry, because really everyone should be asking the questions. And if you take an extra few minutes, so be it, that has to be done. Okay, so that's sort of what is health literacy and numeracy. How many people out there struggle with health literacy? And we have a survey. Now, it is a couple of years old, but it is actually being done at this minute in time. So there'll be an updated survey with results due out next year, which will include some COVID responses, which will be very interesting. But the last survey that we participated in back in, I suppose, 2011, the results came out in 2012, showed that 40% of Irish adults have limited health literacy. So that's 4 out of 10. So I do a lot of training with hospitals and with doctors and nurses and physiotherapists and all a range of people. And I will always use this statistic and this to say to them that out of 10 people that you will have treated today in your surgery or in your hospital, 4 people will have left the appointment not fully understanding what they're meant to do. And we can't, as a health professional, a lot of the training we do is to try and get the health professional to deliver their health messaging a lot clearer. And if they have given you things to do when you've left that appointment, that they've written them down for you really clearly, or they've given you, if they have given you a big brochure, that they've maybe asked the question, is there somebody at home that might be able to talk through that with you? So again, taking account of the fact that not everyone leaves a health appointment fully understanding everything and fully able to maybe do what has been asked of you when you go home. And why, I suppose, is health literacy and numeracy important? Well, we have a little bit of Irish research. Ireland isn't there's other countries who've done a lot more, but we have over the years a lot of the universities, and we've done some research ourselves, which is great. So we know that 1 in 5 people aren't confident that they understand the information. So that's very much, the last slide was 40%. So 4 in 10, this is 1 in 5. So again, the very similar statistics to say to us that not everyone is understanding what's being said to them. Only 43 of us will sometimes ask to clarify the information. I think that's actually quite low. I mean, lots of people we've spoken to, it's a bit embarrassing to ask, you know, oh God, I don't really understand that. So lots of people just leave the appointment. Yes, doctor, of course, no problem, and walk out and might say to the receptionist, he's after asking me to go for a certain test. What's that mean? Or, he said I have to come back on Tuesday, and I don't actually know why I have to go back on Tuesday. So often it's just a thing about, I don't know whether it's an Irish thing or a human nature thing, but we don't like to admit we don't know what they've said to us. So that again is a really big thing that the health services need to be conscious of, and make sure that they check that people understand what they might have said to them. Really worrying statistic there about the wrong dose of medicine. So 17%. So again, that if you had 100 people, 17 people out of the 100 would have taken the wrong dose of medication. Now, if it's a paracetamol and you've taken an extra one, fair enough, that's not so bad. But if it's a very strong medication and it's a real worrying drug that might not agree with other drugs people are on, then that is quite worrying that people are not taking their medication correctly. So that's an important one. And then the last one is about hospital signage. So there are a few really good hospitals, and then there's a lot of hospitals that are working on their signage. But it was no shock to see that 66% of people have difficulty understanding signs and directions. And including myself, a year or two ago, I had to go to Vincent's Hospital at night time. I arrived into the main, it was dark, and I walked past A&E and into the main reception. And why? Because I couldn't see the little sign that was just hidden away. And A&E obviously hadn't got big flashing lights, which I'm not saying you want that. So it is a challenge really about signage when you get into the hospital. Can I understand and work my way around it? We've done more recent research, again, which we thought was a couple of years after the last piece. And again, interesting, some other questions we delved into that Irish people themselves said, please give me less jargon and speak to me more plainly. I had faith in young people. I thought young people were the future. They were going to ask loads of questions. But the statistic there that says people aged 15 to 34 were least likely to ask a doctor, nurse or pharmacist. Now, you'd love to do a bit more research into that, because if they're not asking, and I did read some other stuff more recently actually from a pharmaceutical, that who they are using, so you can imagine a lot of them are using Google, so that's not the best to use Dr. Google, but they would be using Google, but a lot of them actually would ask their parents, which was good, and I suppose their parents then would hopefully be referring them on, and a lot of people would statistic about who people are getting their information or where they're getting their information from. So the next one, embarrassment. I mean, I mentioned that in the previous slide. I mean, it's not a nice thing to sort of, after the doctor has said something to you, oh, I have no idea what he said, and I'm now going to, it takes a lot of courage for any of us to say, I'm really sorry, would you mind explaining that to me again in plain English? And I met a great lady. I was doing some workshops out around the country, and I met a great lady who told me she has a great a little tool she uses when a doctor says something to her she doesn't understand. And she was well into her 70s. She was great. The older you get, she said, the less fear you have. So that's good to know. We'll get a bit more bolshy and we will push it a bit more. So when the doctor said something to her, she says, now, doctor, she said, let's start with the fact that I didn't eat a dictionary for breakfast. So please go back and explain that to me again in layman's language or plain English or simpler, whatever way you want to say it. I thought that was really good. She used humour. She had no problem saying it. She wasn't embarrassed. Maybe the doctor was embarrassed, but he had to go back then and try and explain that to her in another way, use other language. Lots of GPs and doctors actually draw. I've seen that recently where they'll draw you out what they're talking about. So look, here's your thyroid, it's here, this is what's wrong at the minute. And that sometimes for some people who are visual learners, that can be really good. And then finally, that dreadful term, prognosis. It's so 45% of people couldn't define the term prognosis. And again, there's a lot of language around healthcare, diagnosis, prognosis, percentages, you know, you 10% chance that'll work. What does that mean? And again, we have to get a little bit more empowered and confident, all of us, to actually question the doctor a bit more and ask them, what do you mean by that? Have you another solution for me today, or is that all that you're offering me? And trying to build a little bit of confidence around that.
And Helen, what is prognosis?
Yeah, that's a good one. I was actually saying, I didn't look that up before I went. Well, diagnosis is you've been diagnosed with something. So I have, so I've been diagnosed with a chest infection or asthma. So that's what's the problem. And then the prognosis, as far, and we'd be probably told this is not right. The prognosis then is what is the solution for that. So the prognosis for your asthma then is, well, I need to put you on a steroid and a ventilator inhaler for the minute and a thing. So that's they are challenging terms, and I think they're terms that doctors probably use between each other very much. And I mean, we'd have a lot of people say, well, you have to just be careful. I didn't go to medical school, nor do I want to. So please say that to me in a way that I understand. So anyone, I don't know if anyone would like to come in or tell me anything about their experience of visiting the doctor, or hopefully none of you visited the doctor because we're all so healthy. But if you have, is there any experience, and indeed the pharmacy? I know, Margaret, you had a good example for me about visiting the doctor recently.
Yeah, what was that now again?
With your foot.
Yeah. What was it again? I have a rash on my foot, and oh yes, I was given a steroid by the doctor. You know, she gave me a prescription for a steroid and said to take it for 10 days, and that they don't like you taking it for longer than 10 days, and they need to see me again after the 10 days. So I left. Now, they didn't organize an appointment for me, you know, automatically or anything like that. I've been trying to get back, but haven't actually got back since. So, but then I went across the road to the pharmacy and got the cream, and it happened to be very cold cream, and the pharmacist said that it was cold because they have to store it and they don't know when you'll need it. They gave me the cream, and you know, they were saying it'll only last the 10 days or something like that, that you'll, but like Muggins here hasn't got back to the doctor yet and still using the cream. My foot's not too bad now, but the point, I suppose, there's a few different messages there. Like, yeah, I suppose it's actually hard enough to get through to, as it turns out, my particular doctors, it's hard to get through to on the phone, and I'm sure they're very busy with COVID and that, but it yeah, I suppose it was the message with the cream was slightly funny that it lasts so long, but yeah, you may end up using it longer, which probably isn't good, you know. So that was sort of the gist of that. But I see I think Chris has her hand up, so I'm going to just check there. Would you like to speak there, Chris? I think, let me just check. I think, no, grand, that's grand.
So on that example, Margaret, about what I suppose from the improvement level there, and look, I'm not saying a rat was trivial, and thankfully it's clearing up and that's fine, but really what would have been really good there was that when you left, a bit like what happens at my dentist and hopefully most places, that you would be given your appointment for 10 days time. So that, you know, a little card, let's name the appointment, Margaret, it's a Tuesday, it's 6 in the evening. Is that the time good for you? Yeah, you write it, you stick it in your diary, or in your phone, and that's
yes,
it.
that would have been better, and you'd have just come back then at that point, you know. So yeah, and it's, I suppose, I mean, I could have asked that myself. I could have sorted that out immediately, maybe, you know, or tied that down, if you like, immediately before I left, maybe the doctors as well. But yeah, it can be tricky. I'm finding it a little bit tricky to get through, you know. I've had to get through for stuff with the kids or that as well. It's a little bit tricky getting through, you know, at the moment with COVID. And as I said, I'm sure that's understandable enough. They're very busy, but you get through to the receptionist and then the doctor has to call you back. So it's a little bit long-winded at the moment, you know, getting organized. But actually, I couldn't actually get through to the nobody answering the phone kind of thing. But I'll try again. I mean, I have to, that's my own thing I've sort out, you know. Yeah.
And just, I suppose, with the way the health service and you're absolutely, with COVID now, it's even more stresses and strains on it, that we can't no longer hope that, you know, it'll be followed up. I think we all have to take that initiative, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'd love to have a ton more GPs and that they'd be ringing us up and sorting that all out. But for the minute, really it is. And I mean, I did it myself. I went in to the doctor and my child had asthma, and she said to me, you know, to give her 10 puffs of the inhaler, and I was in a flap, and I went, okay, thank you, grand, and I walked out, and I was in the pharmacy before I remembered saying, I never asked her how many times to give, you know, do I just give her 10 puffs and hope she gets better? And I never asked, well, what happens if she doesn't get better? And I also never asked, at what stage is it an emergency that I go to the out of doctor or into the hospital? So actually, I had to ring back in, and thankfully I didn't go back physically in, and I was told, oh, listen, sorry, yeah, okay, great. So there was 2 of us nearly in the wrong there. The doctor didn't have the time or the thing to expand on what I should do if that 10 puffs didn't work, and I didn't ask the question immediately. So we need, as I said, I need to become a little bit more of a detective or a inquisitor and actually ask these questions when the information wasn't very obviously coming to me. So it's sort of empowerment again and confidence for us all. I mean, you would think, God, I felt really silly then. I said, God, I was glad I could ring and not go in. So my embarrassment was hidden behind a telephone. So it's just to try and encourage people to, no question's a silly question ever. And certainly not when it comes to your health. Always ask questions, always go with anything that you feel. We all know our own bodies best. So I think it's really important to go and get anything seen to that you need to.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Helen. Yeah.
So I move on then to so that sort of sets the scene, if you like. So the next bit that I'm looking at are sort of tips. This is the main bit of this really, is to give you some takeaways and some tips to go away with. So we've basically split these up into four main tips for people. So the first one is, and I've a slide now on each of these as we go on, and if anyone is interested in getting some little few things posted to them, I have a nice fact sheet on health literacy, and I've also got a nice little card here that we'll be looking at in a minute, a little credit card size thing that I can post out as well, so we can sort out getting your address afterwards if that's good. So the 4 tips really, the first one is just being prepared. So just having a think, right, great, I got my appointment now with the GP. Maybe you've waited for a week for it and your back's been killing you and different things, or you've been on a waiting list for a hospital appointment for a year and God, I have that appointment now. And just sitting down and maybe thinking, what do I want to find out from this appointment? How have I been feeling? What symptoms have I got that I didn't have when I made that appointment? You know, even within days, different things. You might start it off with a back pain and your appointment's a week later. And actually, you know what, in the last week, Jesus, you know, it's actually moved down a bit now and my knee is a bit sore, or I'm getting headaches. Whatever it is, write down anything you need to say, or if you have any questions, and bring them in with you into the meeting. And again, I would say to people, if you need to bring someone into the meeting with you, please do. And I suppose I say this, and it's one thing that goes without saying, if you're ever going into a meeting to get results for tests, we would always recommend that you bring somebody with you, because it is important that if you're getting results of whatever type, sometimes you can't hear anything after you've been given the result. So it's really important that you have a family member or a close friend who is a strong enough person that if the news equally isn't great, that they could take a few notes and jot a few things down. So it's important.
Oh, yeah. Could you hear me?
Yes.
Could you hear me, Chris? That's Chris.
Yes.
Hi, Chris.
I just wanted to say, now that we're in the pandemic, what I found with my illness, not being able to go to the doctor and having to speak with the doctor on the phone and trying time and time again to try and get through, and then you have to speak with the doctor on the phone while you're sick and you're like, you know, your immune system is down and you're feeling really bad, and he's trying to tell you this on the phone, you know, you have to go and get such a thing, and you can't understand how difficult that is for people too, I'm sure. Well, it was for me. And I would think about people that can't read and write, and they're ringing the doctor and they're telling them all this, and they're like bombarded and they're sick, and do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh.
That's the last few months have been for me 103 times at one stage. And the ambulance wouldn't take me because I didn't have a fever or cough at the time in March, and then having to ring up and wait for the doctor to ring you back for hours later, and you didn't know whether to take a Panadol or 10 Panadol, or, you know, he'd say, well, go down and get such a thing, and you're thinking, well, who will I ask about that? Because the chemist was rushing you, they were rushing, you know, so I was just thinking about
difficult, isn't it?
how people are coping with just having to talk over the phone with the doctor, which is worse again, do you know? Yeah.
And was it on video, Chris? Were you talking to the doctor on video or just on the phone?
No, just on the phone. I didn't have the energy at the time to, but there was no screen thing. They were only taking the phone call, and it was like, quick, you know, what's your problem? And if you didn't have the virus or whatever, oh, it's this or it's that, or, you know, oh, is it your back again? Is it your lupus? Oh, go back, maybe take a second tablet. But if maybe it wasn't that, and you were worried and you were sick, you know, and you go down, you take another one, the tablets didn't work, you were scared to, like, say, go back to the chemist. Just all the fears, like you just said there, that we have. You know, people that cannot read the medication and think, well, you know, is that what's wrong with me? Maybe that wasn't, you know. So it's getting kind of hard that way.
Brilliant points there, Chris, because that's a real worry at the minute, is that people like yourself at home then might decide, God, I'm not going to ring the doctor. You know, it's too much hassle, or it's that, and you absolutely have to ring. And I know it's not the ideal, it's awful.
No, sorry, but you know what? From my experience, the fear there is that if you can't read and write, or if you don't think you're brainy, or you haven't got the confidence, like sometimes the girl on the phone, the secretary, be so bombarded with calls, and she's like, oh, you've already rang 7 times, he'll ring you tomorrow. Or,
Yeah.
and then you're scared and you say, oh Jesus, sure, how can I ring him now? Now the girl doesn't like me, and oh my God, and now I'm worse. Do you get what I'm saying? And then the doctor will ring, he say, I thought I told you, to take, and you're saying, well, I just want to explain to you. And he said, well, we have people ringing off the hook, and there's a virus, and, it's frightening, like, and I know it's happening,
Yeah.
So
No,
it was just
absolutely.
something I thought I'd say,
Yeah. No, I think it's a really good point, Chris. And how we treat people is really important as well. No one should be told, sure, everyone that needs to be seen should be seen respectfully and eventually. I mean, look, none of us like waiting, but it is. And look, thankfully you did stick to your guns and make the call and do what you needed to do. So, but I think really, really good points there around just the current situation as well. I mean, I don't think a phone call replaces anything like the face-to-face with the doctor. So it's really important. No, that's really
good. It's hard at this time. Yeah, it's hard at this time, particularly when you can't see, when it's harder to get to the doctor, when it's harder to actually get in or get them to ring you back. It's more difficult.
Especially, Margaret, if you're very, very ill and you live alone, and you're thinking, I took my temperature, now it's high, and like I was in the position where I had to ring the ambulance, but you weren't allowed to go to the hospital because you had to get permission from the doctor, and then the doctor was gone off the weekend, and you try and get through to the doc care, and they don't have your information, and they're like, well, what's wrong with you? And you have to tell them the whole thing over, and what kind of medication were you on before that, and no, I'm not just talking about myself. I'm talking about someone now that hasn't got a bit of confidence, or they can't read, or say the tablets are sitting in front of them.
Yeah.
And they say, well, what's the name of the tablets you were on? And they're trying to, say, oh, they're it's a P and a C and a, and they're like,
yeah.
It's kind of,
I
get discouraged.
You're so right, though, Chris, about the importance of, and not everyone has that luxury of having somebody living in the house with them, a family member, a spouse, or someone to look after, to be there for you when you're sick. Because when you're sick, you don't feel like doing anything. And that is a real worry and a concern, I suppose, and particularly at this time, because it's harder now to get to medical services. There's the burden of all of it, thinking, God, I don't want to go in there, I'm taking up a place, but people do need to. I suppose that's the key thing, is to say, look, please make that call. Hopefully that you will get a call back, even though it might take hours. That's not great. And that you will hopefully be spoken to kindly and not abruptly. And by all means, and again, I've had lots of speaking to people around the country around this, because it's a tough issue for all of us, even in the how do you say to the person if they don't talk to you very kindly, excuse me, and it's very hard to do it over the phone, probably easier maybe face to face, but excuse me, that wasn't very kind of you, you're not speaking to me very nicely. Because again, what we're all worried about is they'll hang up, or you won't get the treatment that you need. But
exactly, and that's a fear for someone that can't read and write, that has been put down all the time, and they're going to say, well, oh no, I better not say that to her, because she's going to leave me out. And then they're getting sicker and sicker, and they don't want that. When they get through to the doctor, then they say, oh, well, I better hurry up and say what I have to say, because he's going to think, well, Jesus, I have 100 people waiting and she's going on. Just because,
Brilliant. Okay, so that's really great, Chris. You've covered a load of pieces there. We were just on preparing for the meeting. We've now got into the meeting and out of the meeting again. But some little tips here that again are very useful points, are just around asking questions. And again, don't feel any way bad about. I'll never forget. I went to the doctor once, and she said to me, I just my face was sore, and she says, you have neuralgia, and then she goes, that's nerve pain. And I went, oh, no, it didn't really, I don't know what I said, but I've never forgotten that, because she told me what I had, which is a word I never heard of, and why would I? But she explained it, and to this day I've never forgotten what neuralgia is, nerve pain. So it's very, if doctors were trying to work with medics and the profession to try and get them to speak in more layman's terms and define things, but if they don't do that, by all means, ask them, what does that mean? Because it is important you understand what your own health care treatment or diagnosis or whatever is. Then the other thing we always like to say to people about when you come out of a meeting, and that's what this little card does here, is that please come out of the meeting knowing the answer to these 3 questions. And the third one is particularly important. So what is my main problem? I have a chest infection. What do I need to do? Well, you put me on an antibiotic that I need to take at 6 o'clock in the evening with food. Oh, thanks a million, doctor. Off I go. That's fine. But why did I need to take the antibiotic at 6 o'clock with food? Well, you need to take it with food at that time because it needs to be taken with something else in your stomach, because if you don't take it with food, then and you take it on an empty stomach, it doesn't agree with your stomach and you could get an ulcer, for example. So, oh, right. So because you've got a little bit of the why you need to do something, it stands to reason you remember that a little bit more, and you now will think to yourself, God, I'm not taking that antibiotic now on its own. I'm going to make sure I have that on my dinner or a sandwich or whatever it is at that time. So the why is quite important. And then the final piece is check that I understand what's been said to me. So again, if the doctor has said, off you go now, and I dressed your wound there, the nurse, the public health nurse, I dressed your wound and she gave me instructions. So rather than just going, thanks a million, and hope I remember, what I would do is I'd say back, so nurse, now I'm just going to go through this again. You dressed my wound, today's Thursday, you told me that the wound will be fine now until next week, and you're going to give me an appointment for next Wednesday and I'll come back then. Oh yeah, grand, thanks. So I repeated back to her or him what I need to do. And of course, if I was thinking back to my other example a minute ago about the asthma, what happens, the other question that we should throw in there if the nurse, because of whatever time or whatever, hasn't said it to me is, now nurse, what happens if my leg begins to feel or goes red, or I start feeling pains in my leg between now and when I have to come back next Wednesday? Oh God, Helen, sorry, I should have said to you that if your leg feels any way painful or weeping or anything like that, I want you to ring this number. I want you to go into the emergency doctor, whatever it is, so that we leave having a good sense of when I next have to come and do something, and what do I do if it doesn't get any better. You know, and again, simple things like that. But I think we often and I think Chris, a great point there, if we don't feel well, or we're emotional, or we're just, God, I feel cry, you don't ask these questions because you're not at the top of your game where you are. So that's why it is useful, funny, if you have somebody with you, because the person who's with you wants to make sure, well, what am I going to do with him or her when I leave now, and check that out. So they're just a couple of tips that I think are quite useful. Now I've gone through them, and of course I have a slide on each of them, but we'll just make sure if I haven't covered anything here. So going back again, number 1, be prepared. So I mentioned about writing the questions down. The other thing is to bring a little notebook with you. So again, take a few notes if you're comfortable with that. Again, not everyone is, so and if you have someone with you, let them do it. And if not, no problem. Phones are great nowadays. If you have a little voice thing, you might say to the doctor, sorry doctor, look, I didn't bring a pen with me, or I don't like writing. Would you mind just speaking those instructions into my phone there, please? And you press record on your whatever, and the doctor says, take them 3 times a day, 1 in the morning, 1 at lunchtime, 1 in the evening, and make sure you take it with food. Great, doctor, thanks a million, I have that, and off you go. So just to make sure that you get as much information as you need, and we mentioned there to bring a family member or a friend with you can be helpful. The next one then about asking questions is just to say, look, be honest, you know, just don't be afraid to ask something. Let just say to the doctor, I don't understand what you were saying there. Could you explain that to me again, please? If they hand you anything, so sometimes they give you a leaflet, you know, just you could say to them, is that written in plain English, or you know, if it looks a bit, I remember they gave me a sheet that was just a printed out sheet, and there was an awful lot of information on it. But when I went back then a couple of weeks later and I was getting the same thing again, this time the sheet they gave me was about an inhaler, actually had a diagram, and it showed you how to take the inhaler. So again, really useful if the sheet's information and written information should be written clearly and plain English. And then again, contact information, you know, who can you ring if you have any problems or concerns? And if you know that Sally on the phone is lovely, you're probably more likely to ring Sally. But if you know Sally might bark down the phone at you because she's had 100 calls by midday, then, you know, is there another contact that you can go to, or who do you ring? The pharmacists are fabulous. So again, if you've got a relationship, hopefully, with your local pharmacy, you'll know them by name, you'll know the ladies or gentlemen serving you in your chemist and your pharmacy. You can chat to them. I've often gone in, got a headache here, what'll I do there? And they're really good. So having a good pharmacy and a good pharmacist is great. So this is just an example. It's funny, just sometimes people, you think to yourself, God, what would you do or if this was said to you? So imagine you're going to the hospital and someone says, okay, look, there's the NAS paramedic has arrived and they took Mary to the nearest ED, and the doctors there are going to give them an IV, an MRI, an ECG and a CT, and then this will all be before we'll admit them to the ICU. It's like this, even reading it there, it's hilarious, because it's like this bundle of acronyms and shortened words that you're going, what are you talking about? Like, even to any of us, and imagine I was going in and looking for my mother or my sister or your partner or something, and you're told some information like this. You have no idea what they're talking about. It's a different language. So do I understand? No, but then am I actually going to say, sorry, would you mind? Well, what are you talking about? You know, and that is a thing. So just to let people know what it is. So the NAS is the National Ambulance Service. Now, I don't think, hopefully, but even a paramedic, I mean, that's a challenging word. You know, we just call it the ambulance. The ambulance arrives and has taken you to ED, is sort of the new term for A&E. So it's like emergency department. And again, you know, the acronym, taking you to hospital really is what we'd all be saying. And then the doctors and nurses will do an IV. So you know, an IV is the intravenous. That would be like a drip, for example. The MRI, I don't even know what MRI stands for. All I know is it's a scan. So again, on a medical world would know that. So it's a scan where they put you in, you get a scan. ECG, again, don't even know, that's electro something. So that's to do with your heart, and they would monitor your heart and see how your heart's working. And then a CT is a CT scan it's a head scan. So again, that's funny, from watching programs, I actually don't know. I have them on the thing there. I'm not going to go in. I actually don't know what the full titles of them are, but I do know what they do. And then the final one, then ICU, I suppose we're quite familiar with that at the minute because of COVID, and we're hearing all the time of ICU. So that'd be intensive care unit is the ICU, where you would need a lot of care. So again, just it is interesting. It's just, look, there's a lot of assumptions made, and people, particularly when you go into hospital, they're busy and they don't have a lot of time to talk to you. And I had this experience recently going in with a family member as well, and there really needs to be people in hospitals nearly translating for you, or customer service staff, I think, helping you out to see, do you need anything, and are you okay, and do you get that? Because it is a big, and at the minute I'm not even sure anyone can go in with you, so it can be quite an experience in dealing with that. But look, we're saying this because now I want, if any of us come across those people speaking to us with that language, that we'd be comfortable with saying, I don't know what that is, and that you could do that. So that would be good. Now, the last one then, sort of around, or coming to the second last one, is around that checking for understanding. So we check for understanding. Again, I gave that example there earlier, but it really just means confirming that you understand what the doctor has said. So imagine they have told you to go home. I gave the example a minute ago about the antibiotic and taking it at 6 o'clock with food, so you don't get an ulcer. So ideally, the doctor, and this, I do a lot of training with sort of health staff, and I would say to doctors and nurses and even the pharmacist, ask the person now, just to check they understood it, what they're going to do when they go home. And as I said, if they don't ask you that, if I was you, let's all start repeating to them. I heard a great gentleman speak recently about this, and he said he's a doctor, and Friday night he ordered a Chinese takeaway. And he rang the takeaway and he said, hi, he said, how are you? Great, I'd like prawn crackers, like stir-fry chicken, fried rice, and maybe he was having a can of 7-Up or something. So he reamed that off. And the person at the other end in the Chinese takeaway said, okay, you want prawn crackers, stir-fried chicken, fried rice, and a can of 7-Up. And he said, the other doctor, he says, we've got to become, he said, in hospitals, the Chinese takeaway person. We have to repeat back to people constantly what we're asking them to do. We can't just assume when you say, like the Chinese takeaway person doesn't assume when you said it once that they got it all correct. And they say it back to you so that they're clear that they have the order correctly. And I thought it was a really interesting example. As a doctor, he was talking about this. This is something he said we need to do more in hospital. So either tell the person and then ask the person to say that back to me now, what I need you to do when you go home. So, for example, if you were leaving hospital and you'd say, okay, doctor, so when I go home now, I've no prescription because you've just sent the prescription directly to my pharmacy. So when I go home now, I'm going down to my pharmacy on the way home and I'm picking up my new prescription and I have 6 drugs to take every day. And you've told me that I must take 3 of them in the morning and 3 of them in the evening. You know, so whatever it is that you're speaking back to them, whatever the instructions are. So really, they've done research on this. It takes them like 2 minutes more to do this, but it has really good positive response from people doing what they're meant to be doing. And that's what we all want. If I'm ill and I have to do something, I want to know exactly what I have to do. I want to do it and I want to get better. And so the clearer I am about that, the better chance I'm healthy and fine, and I don't have to come back into the health service again because I made a mistake or I didn't fully understand what I had to do.
Helen, okay. Sorry, I'm popping in just because I'm just conscious of the time. We're a little bit over time.
We might, 3 there.
Yes,
well, the last one then, Margaret, just is around this Ask Me 3. So this is sort of a summary piece because I've sort of repeated this a few times. And this is the little card here. People can see it. So it's a credit card. We're happy to send this out to people. So just a little thing. And on the back are these 3 questions. And again, it's that thing I was saying earlier to remind you, don't leave the surgery. Don't leave the appointment without knowing what is my main problem here? What do I need to do? But importantly, why do I need to do it? And there are 3 great questions. And we were asked to get this card printed up by some of our learners out in Tala in an older people's program, a health program, because they wanted to stick it into their wallet. And when they go to the doctor or the pharmacy, that they take it out and read it. So I think it's a really good example of something useful that you can have and be able to do. Okay, well, Margaret, that's really, the other bits I have were just around the crystal clear pharmacy and sort of your services. But look, these are the main important things really around health literacy and making sure that people are confident and comfortable with asking questions and don't feel anyway, stand up, it's your body, your thing, and ask the question you need to ask.
Thank you very much, Helen. I do think it's worth mentioning to people watching about the Crystal Clear Award, and it's, to my understanding, it's an award that goes to the pharmacies if they're literacy friendly. They applied to NALA to become a literacy friendly pharmacy, and then there's a number of things they do, and then if they meet those criteria, they become a crystal clear pharmacy and it's a NALA, and there's a sponsor, the MSD sponsored as well. Would that be a good sum up of it, Helen?
Yeah, I suppose that's really good to watch out for. If your local pharmacy has that sticker, then they're crystal clear. It's really good. And I suppose the last thing, Margaret, that yourself and myself were speaking about that we probably should talk about just to say is around where people are getting their information from. Just to say to people, look, just being with all of the information that's out there, and there's a lot at the minute, and when it comes to health, just to look for those good sources. So all of the, so if the doctor is thrown out of the antibiotic and this, then you want to go home and look up something, make sure what you're looking at or what you're reading or listening to is a useful source. So we have like the HSE, the World Health Organization, WHO, RT News. Get your facts, your newspapers, your GP or pharmacist. And just on the other side then, just be careful of believing everything that you might read on things like social media or Facebook or WhatsApp. I've had some funny WhatsApp stuff sent to me, or even chatting to people. Who is the expert? And just in these particular times, just we're asking people to just stop and to think and maybe just check that fact before you think it's something that you need to do, because particularly with the health issue at the minute, all of us, it's a useful one to think about.
And actually, we had a webinar on being clued in to the media during this week as well. So people might like to have a look back at that webinar if they're interested in that area about sources of information. And Helen, is it correct that there's about 150 pharmacies that do have that crystal clear mark now?
Yeah, 103. Yeah.
103, that's great, yeah. So people could look out and maybe ask their pharmacy, are they looking at becoming literacy friendly as well? It might be a good thing to kind of move this on and improve that area. So come here, I just want to thank you very much, Helen, for that input, and I hope those of you who have joined us today got something out of this presentation, this webinar. And thank you very much, Helen, and thank you to those who have attended. Just want to say there's the other webinar tomorrow if people are interested as part of, so that's on shopping and everyday maths. And as I said, we'll be putting this webinar up on YouTube. If people didn't get a chance to join us today, they might look at it on YouTube. So Helen, thanks again, and thanks to those who've attended. And I'll finish up the webinar now. So thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.